The Committee of the Whole for the City Council of the City of Highland Park, Illinois, February 23rd, 2026. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Center.
Present.
Councilmember Brockman.
Here.
Councilmember Ross.
Ross, you here?
Here.
Councilmember Tapia.
Here.
Councilmember Littleworth.
Littleworth, you're here? She's here.
Councilmember Bloomberg. Mayor Rotary.
Here, we have a quorum, thank you. We need to approve the participation of Councilmember Littleworth via electronic process. Councilmember Littleworth, who is the person you love the most right now?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Who do you love the most right now?
Baby Theo.
All right, it's her. She can join us.
Is it really me? Is it really me?
Any objections to Councilmember Littleworth participating? I see heads shaking and no response, so I'm going to go with, I think we're okay. Thank you for joining us this evening. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting of the Committee of the Whole held February 9th, 2026?
So moved. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you, thank you. Our next item, our first item of scheduled business is considerations pertaining to the permanent place of remembrance. I'd like to thank everybody for what I know will be an important and emotional conversation. The special working group has been meeting since last November, beginning a multi-year process of planning for the permanent place of remembrance. And as you may recall, the City Council hosted several roundtable discussions through which the working group was established. The working group is responsible for guiding the planning process, but this City Council is going to be receiving their recommendations and making the final determination. In the process, we've identified three primary objectives for the place of remembrance: to create an accessible public place for reflection, remembrance, and solace, to honor the community's resiliency, especially those who were injured, and importantly, to pay tribute to the memories of Katie Goldstein, Arena McCarthy, Kevin Michael McCarthy, Stephen Strauss, Jackie Lovey Sondheim, Nicholas Toledo, and Eduardo Ivaldo. I'd like to ask us to take a moment of silence to honor these beloved members of our community. Thank you so much. I will turn the discussion now over to Emily. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So, we're here to discuss the place of remembrance and talk a little bit more about how we move forward in this process. So we'll start with, this will be our agenda. We'll start with introductions, talk a little bit more about the overview and the process and where we're heading, reflect on the meaning of the place of remembrance and what it means to you, and have a ideas discussion, a little bit, be able to talk a little bit more about and engage with you in the process and really have some ideation about where we're heading through this process. And then we'll talk about connecting and staying connected throughout the process. As we do this, I'd like to turn this over to our team with SWA, our design team, and their partner All Together was a communications and an engagement firm who'll be leading this part of the discussion. We have about 30 minutes for this discussion, so we'll need to make sure we're getting through everything. And as they come up, we'll have them introduce themselves to you. So, looks like Christian's going to lead, so come on up. Your time to shine.
Hello everyone, good afternoon. My name is Christian Gist. I am a brand strategist and communications specialist with All Together. We are a place-based creative agency headquartered in Evanston, Illinois. For this project, we'll be engaging the community and working with SWA, our design partners, on what this looks like. Working with everyone that has been impacted by this and getting their feedback on how the design process moves forward. And then we turn over to SWA, who will take all of that feedback and come up with some beautiful designs. So for today's meeting, we wanted to open it up as a listening session. I have some questions prepared for you. If you have something to share, we'd love to hear it. If you want to respond at a later time, we will make that option available. But as much as you want to share, as little as you want to share, we just wanted to open it up, and we'll ask some questions about the feeling of the place, the meaning, and then we'll lean into some design preferences and what this looks like and feels like and how that all translates. And this is our firm, as well as SWI. Okay, so a little bit more information about where we're at in the project timeline. We kicked off the project back in January. We'll continue this until September 2027. Right now, we are at the listening, discovery, and engagement phase. From there, once we have a good sense of what everybody wants and we have our engagement summary, we'll move forward into concept refinements and schematic design to design development, and then ultimately construction administration. And that's right now our listening sessions will be taking place between February, moving into March, and then we'll have an internal survey and statement. All of the feedback that we receive will be summarized into something that is not specific, but still into any individual or person or group, but we'll take everybody's considerations there. Okay, so moving into questions. Our first one is, how would you like to feel at the place of remembrance?
I'm going to ask people to just shout out their answers and not wait for me to call on them. Peaceful? Peaceful?
Same.
Pensive.
Welcoming.
Quiet?
Safe.
Peaceful.
Peaceful? Okay, that's good.
Reflective.
What would you like the space to represent in our community?
Remembrance?
Same.
Unity.
Respect?
That day in our community.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think my word is for maybe a different question, but.
Take your hand away from your
Oh,
mouth so
sorry.
they can hear you.
Yeah. That somehow everybody can feel represented, but.
Represented, representation.
Representation.
Inclusivity. Okay. What's
I would add hope.
hope? What story would you like the design of the place of remembrance to tell?
The events of that day and how tradition is important in our community.
I would say actually the diversity of our city.
Mm-hmm.
I would say the resilience of our community.
Still the word I was about to say. I agree.
Yeah.
Okay.
Resilience and moving forward.
The future,
Yeah,
Me as well.
holding each other together.
yeah.
I was thinking strength and resilience, yeah.
Yeah.
This is a little bit more personal, but where do you feel the safest? What things make you feel safe, and why? Why does that make you feel safe? It could be anywhere in the world.
Say with family and friends.
I would say nature.
In the heart of Highland Park.
Repeating, but home.
Home. Yeah, home is a good place.
Yeah, I would say kindness.
Kindness. Okay. For our next question, how do you see the two sites, Port Clinton and the Rose Garden, working together, if at all, or the journey between the two? And these could be the story that they tell between the two, design elements that they share. It could be nothing at all. But if there's any relation, if you would like to see that, how would you like to see it?
I don't think it's a journey. I think they have to sort of interact in a way that they express in either place all the things we just put forward or that people put forward in some small way and then in some larger way.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, you know, in asking this question, I'm thinking immediately they can't be disconnected. They have to have a connection. And, you know, maybe it's a piece of the Rose Garden design that is in, you know, is in Port Clinton. You know, something of that kind.
Could it be the palette be reflective? Because I kind of feel like they serve two purposes. I think the Rose Garden is more for solace and respite and reflection, and then you're in the middle of Port Clinton, and that's more remembering. I don't know that they have to work together because I think they have two purposes. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, working together is a little tricky because it's about the same event, right? So I don't know if it has to be a linear working together, but they have to capture different elements of the story.
Right.
And those elements could be completely different from each other, but that's a way of working together.
It's a good way.
And just for the members of the public who have joined us late, there's going to be a huge opportunity for community input. This is just for the council to kind of brainstorm and share their thoughts. So didn't want people to feel like this is it and I don't have a voice. Absolutely, we will fully embrace hearing from the community. Thanks.
Anything else?
Yeah, I do feel like they need to sort of reflect the fact that they have different purposes, right? And visitors to the Rose Garden are going to go there for a very specific purpose. It's kind of out of the way, intentionally. And so that should be thoughtful.
And those that are not choosing necessarily to go there for that purpose, they have to be thoughtful too.
Yep, agreed.
I do think the Rose Garden has that kind of a purpose. I like that. But in some way, it raises the level then of Port Clinton since that's where it occurred to a different level.
Okay. To the same effect here, we have, you know, Port Clinton will continue to serve as a vibrant business hub. How do you hope the balance feels when you're there?
I think to Councilmember Tapia's point, not too apparent,
Subtle.
subtle,
Subtle.
yeah.
One thought that I had was respecting, and I mean this only with respect, where people died. Currently, people are running up and down the stairs. And it's, to me, like, maybe we put a garden there and have that be more of a, almost like a sacred space, but not an in-your-face, this is where it happened, but we remember and we protect almost those memories. But have it be subtle so that people who come to Port Clinton see this beauty, but aren't necessarily having to remember that horror. I don't know.
Well, it sounds like it's more, that there is something symbolic,
Right.
but it's not explicit.
That's
Mhm.
perfectly.
And then for those of
explained.
us who experienced it,
Right,
we know.
right,
And that what we see helps us remember. And then for those that, you know, who, they don't know where, what happened and where,
right.
it's part of the beauty of the place.
Of this gathering place, still in the middle of the city.
What were you thinking?
I guess from the beginning, I hoped that whatever is designing Port Clinton Square is, you know, enhancing the experience of being in Port Clinton Square where, you know, where it's serving both purposes and in that way become a, you know, beloved part of Port Clinton Square, something that, you know, people love about Port Clinton Square,
Right.
while still, you know, telling the story.
Yeah, and I like the combination of having something there to remember and then like continuing to make, you know, as a central hub, the new memories and just gather, and well, be able to also then reflect in addition, but then like off to the, and I like your idea of where to, maybe a garden or off to one side of the square, but the location, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Which I think ties back to, as someone mentioned earlier, like tradition and community and so and gathering, which is kind of what Port Clinton is for. So it's a chance to make new memories while also having this subtle reflection there.
Right. I think Annette had something to say.
I think it's going to be quite a challenge, but I really, I'm sure they're up to it because I've always looked to, once we decided on having the Rose Garden as a place that's more reflective and larger and gathering, you know, both privately or families or however we do it. But I love the idea that there would be something real in nature in Port Clinton to remember, but it's a very delicate balance because I agree with the mayor that I don't want to take care of the vibrancy. I don't want it to be anything but very subtle because life has continued and it is the center in many ways of, you know, our vibrancy and an economic development and a lively community. So when you say running up and down the stairs, I think that perfectly represents Port Clinton. So I don't know how you do it, which is why I'm not an artist or a developer or anything like that, but I love that everyone's taking that into account because that subtlety really could make it as meaningful as we'd like it to be.
With respect to that, I want to call out our design team, and we're going to have a few mood boards that we're going to hopefully get your feedback on, and we'll make these as we again go into larger community engagement. We'll have these available for everyone, but we have an opportunity for you all to kind of look at some things we put together. There's some different design elements in here, different features, and you can offer your feedback. We will present these now, but we'll also leave these here, and we have some stickers. So if there's a certain part that you love, you know, you can put a sticker there and expand on it however you want.
We have,
Ben, actually, do you want to come to the microphone?
oh yeah, sorry.
Ben, feel free to introduce yourself.
Will do. Hi everyone, Ben Waldo, SWA, and I have Olivia Pinner with me as well from SWA. We're the landscape architects supporting the design process here. We developed some boards physical boards that you can all engage with, and we can leave these with you too so you have more time to consider them after the fact. But the intent here is with sort of several kind of high level aspects of, you know, how the design would feel physically. We have sort of a range of feelings. These are shown as like collages essentially of different images that kind of capture a range of how the space could begin to feel physically. And so kept it fairly open-ended, and I just want to get your reaction to these kind of different moods, as it were. And so I think maybe the easiest way to do this space-wise, if I don't know, I know you all have your microphones right in front of you, but if I were able to leave one of the boards at a time at this end of the table and you all kind of come and, do you have stickers?
Or do you want us
maybe?
to shout out?
Yeah, do you
Yeah,
wanna-
Ben,
Yeah, we could do that too.
Here,
Yep.
and we can
People
shout
should be
out.
able
Yep.
to see it and watch it.
Yep.
We just
Right.
Yeah, we have
10
about
minutes?
10 minutes.
Okay. So I'll put this here so that I'm not blocking the microphone.
So what we've done as well is, I would say that these are sort of complementary to these targeted questions, and it's more intuitive. And the intent with the collage is to not allow like one specific image to be like the specific idea, but it's more of an overall character like Ben suggested, and we've set them up kind of on a gradient, so it's not necessarily like one or the other, if you will. More just like kind of what end of the spectrum.
And is this for which one?
So this category,
This
we're
works,
saying
like it's-
movement,
He does.
and we're intentionally
Or
being.
Clinton or Garden?
Rose
In-
garden?
I
or
think
Both.
either?
Both.
Okay, so these are just elements
Yeah,
for, okay.
yeah. So this first set of images is related to movement. So the first is more kind of open, ambiguous, loose, than something that might be more sort of organic but delineated, I guess. And then the latter is maybe more formal, more linear.
There's no wrong answer.
Yeah.
Well, I gravitate toward the middle one, where I like the curves and there's more of a design, less of an open thing. It's kind of conducive to kind of bring people together and inward. And the formal one just feels too cold.
I too would lean middle to left. I find the right to be a little rigid. To Council Member Tapia's earlier point around sort of nature being a good provoking feeling, like that obviously is captured more so in 1 and 2, in my view.
There's
Thank you.
a warmth, to the middle, the middle images. I think I want to sort of make the comment that, what the final design looks like could wind up looking more like either end of the spectrum. It depends on what you're trying to ultimately convey. It may wind up looking more rectilineal or something.
But your preference is?
But my preference
more-
is for the warmth of,
I like the middle, but I also, like John said, I like the left too, the movement piece too. I like that look of it as well. That seems welcoming and open as well to me.
I'm 2 to 1 also, a little bit to the left of 2.
Yeah.
In here.
1.5.
Mayor, thank you. Thank
Yep.
you for the picture. I don't like 3 at all. I like 2, and I'm surprised because I'm usually a pretty formal person, but I think 1 is beautiful also. So I'm kind of, 2 is curved and everything, make it feel good, but I really like the looseness of 1 also. So
Reflecting the Jens Jensen approach to landscape. This one is done.
Thank you.
they're both lovely.
Okay, that's all right.
Great, thank you.
You get as much time.
So this board relates to material, and so again, kind of a gradient from maybe sort of rougher around the edges, looser to kind of more crisp, clean on the far right, and then somewhere in between in the center.
for me, 2 and 3.
Mhm. Same here. I like the water elements too.
Yeah, I tend toward the more.
I understand.
I tend to the more organic.
All else equal.
Rougher.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's what I would say too, or the rougher letter like that.
I do too. 2 to 1, again.
What was the, 2 to 1.
Okay.
although the greenery is very nice on 3, so maybe I would say 2 to 1, but with a little more green.
We have some more greenery to help decide that. Don't worry.
But wait, there's more.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we can.
Next.
So, this board relates to the experience of nature from kind of the more ecological, wild feeling on the left to something more formal on the right, and again, something perhaps in between that in the center.
You know, I like the middle one, it's very elegant, it's more finished than the left, so while I said in the previous one I like the rawer
Yeah.
one, but I like the contrast of
Nice.
something raw and something more finished.
I would agree with that. I think you could have both. And to an earlier comment about liking the water elements, I would love water elements, but we live in this climate. I think it would be very hard to do, although I love the idea of it. But I think, you know, some of the more refined with some that are, you know, grasses or something that are freer flowing. Maybe even, what I love about tall grasses is the sound, you know, in the wind.
The attraction for butterflies.
And that too, but it also makes a sound.
Yeah. So as far as the water element, we've talked, I think a lot of us like that. One of the projects that they did was for the Sandy Hook shooting, and they have a pond that they just drain in the wintertime and refill when it's not gonna explode with ice. So it's not totally ruled out. We can certainly look at that.
Yeah, I think with something like that, you just try to make it so that it looks, you know, beautiful in the winter too.
Exactly.
You know, maybe the way snow sits in it feels intentional. Any other
What do you think?
questions or comments on this?
Yeah, I would go,
Believe it or not, I like 3. I like the more formal green. I don't know, it just looks so kempt. Although to Councilmember Ross's point, the sound of the grasses does seem beautiful, and that is more indigenous to our area. So from that perspective, you know, I'm easy. But I do think that the green on the more traditional one is just beautiful. Maybe that's what that's how I do my house. Beautiful.
I would go with, I like 2 as well. That's my choice.
I like to, and keep in mind, we have winter for part of this, so it's gonna need to be able to handle not much growing, to your point.
Yeah.
The grasses will be there throughout the winter, and there can be other interesting structures, you know, and trees that hold berries.
Good point. I'm a 2.
Yeah, I as well lean toward 2, but to Councilman Tapia's point about sort of contrast
Yeah,
is
yeah.
lovely.
Related, but its own kind of quality to color, which can be related to, you know, obviously in a landscape project, a lot of the color will come from nature. So a lot of these images continue to emphasize that, but there could be other, you know, material elements that have, you know, natural colors or not. And so this is maybe more muted, more natural, more kind of earthy color ranges. In the center, this is more sort of colorful but soft, I guess I would say. And then on the far right, really like bright colors. So think about how that range sort of would make you feel. What would be the emotional experience of that?
Yeah, the bright colors for me seem too celebratory, but that one on the left feels too muted. And so I like that this sort of brings it down some, but there's an elevation, which to me it invites reflection, right?
Mhm.
That it seems like it has a broader palette of mood, from reflective to uplift,
Sure.
and the others kind of go in opposite directions.
May I speak?
Sure.
Sorry, I don't mean to keep
No, go ahead.
following one person, but I agree about the bright colors. I'm not really sure. There seems to be a little more consistency in the middle, but they're also going to bloom at different times.
Right.
Flowers bloom at different times, so I assume you'll plant it in,
Yeah. Yeah.
around that.
Absolutely. We would be looking at kind of a full season's worth of palette and how that evolves. And obviously, in the fall, the color palette's going to feel different inherently than it does in the spring. But sort of working, where does it kind of lean towards, right? Regardless of time of year is, I think, how we're.
And perennials versus annuals, and what attracts
Mhm.
pollinators, and what do you guys think?
I would agree with the comment, sort of center and left of center. I think the bright is beautiful, but overly vibrant, too colorful for what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree, but
I'm exactly there.
I would.
Go ahead.
I would go more with number one though. I like that more muted feel. I like that, like when people can go out and it's not as bright. And I like there is still color, but I just like the look of that and the feel of that of one a little better.
I'm between 1 and 2.
Okay.
I'm
Great.
between 1 and 2.
Okay.
I don't like the bright colors, obviously.
Great.
Sorry about that, Councilman Bruckman, before I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, that's
It's
okay.
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 That's all right. Just a couple more. This is about night presence, how lighting on the site would be implemented, whether that's something that's more kind of atmospheric, ambient, soft versus more kind of formal, defined in the center, and then all the way on the right is, something maybe even more experiential, kind of part of the experience of actually visiting the memorial beyond sort of lighting as a sort of safety and accent feature.
I like the more ambient, the quieter, and the middle one makes a little too circus-y. I feel like I like the quieter
Number 1.
number one.
Okay.
So this time I'll follow you, number one, also, for the same reason.
John?
I like number 3. I think there's something really impactful, experientially use the term around something like that.
Okay. Carissa?
I like number one as well. I like the quiet look of it as well. Peaceful.
Annette?
Number 1, I don't like number 2 at all, and even number 3 is a bit much for me. The subtlety is beautiful in 1.
I agree.
And if I could add, what I like about one is people will create their own interpretation of what the experience. These kind of tend to tell too much of a story or too much of an experience that is supposed to be experienced a certain way. And this one, you kind of make your own journey.
Thanks.
And finally, memory or commemoration. So this would be sort of how this one's a little bit more abstract, but it's kind of like how do we want to use form, abstract idea, space to create an experience that reflects, remembers, celebrates the lives that were lost, whether that be more subtle or more kind of direct and formal.
I'm a fan of subtle. And I think part of, with all due respect, because you may be able to come with more defined images that I like better, but just in general, I feel like it should be subtle and something that people, to the comment Councilmember Tapia just made, that people can impose their own interpretation of, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Pressing the mute button when you're talking.
Yeah, that's right.
I agree with Councilmember Ross. I think those are good comments.
Me too, yeah, same with me.
Subtle.
Yeah, so I wanted to wait to see the final one. The thing that's really missing here is diversity of different aesthetic traditions. Because there's a very large Latino element to what happened, and I don't see any of that here. Now, I'm not saying that these elements can't work, but I'm not seeing that influence at all. And one of the challenges will be that Latino culture tends not to be subtle. So I think that's one big piece that's missing here. And you saw my reactions to a lot of things I like, but I'm really concerned now that that aspect is just absent right now.
Mm-hmm.
To that point, because I was thinking before we walked in, that we have a large, Jewish population, a large Hispanic, we're a pretty diverse community, but I certainly hear you on Hispanic, Spanish-speaking part, and I had thought, and I know it's too early for this, but there might be some traditions, as like lighting candles or leaving something at the site of where something happened, and to make space for that somehow. But I guess my thought was, the more abstract it is, the more, or to the extent that it's abstract, you can put your interpretation onto it. Anyway, but I hear you on that.
Yeah, and then just to then expand, I mean, I focused on the Latino thing, but to the point that this is a diverse community, right? So what other elements might be missing culturally, right? And so, and again, explicitness, I'm not asking for something explicit, right? Like a Day of the Dead mask or something, I'm not talking about that, but something evocative of the different cultures that are part of our community that were affected. And not just those that were killed and injured, but just the whole community. This is for also the expanded thing. And I just want to make sure that people see them. Somebody said inclusive in one of the words, that no matter what culture you come from or what religious tradition, you'll find something that speaks to you from who you are, even as it's speaking to all of us, because we all went through it together.
So one of the questions we had was, would we have a plaque? And it would certainly be in English and in Spanish, because there was such impact on people who speak both languages. One of the questions that I had was that for Clinton, given that it is essentially monochromatic at this point, is there an opportunity to introduce mosaic at some point to, if you're doing something in the park? So I appreciate you raising those points, and I think the team hears you loud and clear, and there should be a way to incorporate without causing stress, because sometimes the two are in conflict, but you don't want to disrespect one and exclude the other, and so I said, good luck with that balance.
It can be done.
It can be done, absolutely.
Yeah. I agree with Councilmember Ross. I like the feel of number one. On the other hand, I'm really grateful that Councilmember Tapia brings up this aspect so that perhaps we can somehow incorporate it for all the people that we have.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mayor, I just just kind of want to summarize as before we transition to the next phase of this. So, and thank you to the SWA and all of your team. So certainly this was the first of many conversations with our corporate authorities as we go through this listening engagement session, as well as preparing for schematic designs. So just as a reminder to the council, we sent email communication inviting each elected official to have a one-on-one with the consultant team. And the conversation and discussion this evening provides kind of as a good launch point just to get an idea of the type of feedback that we are looking for you as they prepare to do their work on the next step. For public information, very important, victim feedback and public engagement is a critical component to this project. And so continuing now until June, we are going to be doing an extensive public engagement outreach to get the same type of feedback from the public to make sure that whatever is designed here is really reflective of what we want as a community. And then certainly final design will come to the mayor and city council for final consideration. So that's kind of the next steps that are going to happen. So I want to thank the team here. Yes.
One is, and I was going to use the word when we were asking to Councilmember Tapia's point, you know, some balance between something that's universally, you know, more universal in terms of people being able to, you know, experience it, but also recognizing that we have, you know, some constituencies that feel it very strongly.
Right.
And then the other question was, is this the only time council will be able to react together? I mean, to sort of respond together, or we just get
No, the schematic design will come back to
Yeah.
the council. But
Okay.
in terms of providing your feedback, what's your vision, how do you want to feel,
This
what
is
kind of
sort of the
elements do you want
macro
to see?
pieces.
This is that time, so
Yeah.
definitely as this,
So when there's a rough sketch, and that's what you mean by
yes,
schematic
yes,
design?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah, that'll certainly come back to the council.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks. Any other questions? Thank you all for your thoughtful
Thank you.
input, and thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you.
So appreciate it. Thank you.
So I'm gonna invite Assistant Manager Emily Tao up. So certainly, as the council knows, when we were first deciding on the location for the permanent place of remembrance, understanding that the Rose Garden is also designated as a local historic landmark, that was one consideration that we just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of. At this point, we want to just provide information to you as it pertains to the background and history of that very briefly, the components of that, and then get your feedback so we can give direction to the consultants as they prepare the plan, balancing the two aspects of it, the place of remembrance design, and then understanding and being informed certainly of the historic elements of the project.
So a brief history of the Rose Garden and Laurel Park, more broadly Laurel Park. It was acquired by the Park District in 1930, and then in 1942 the Gardeners Memorial was developed and then donated to the city, which is the actual landscaping component of the park. At which point in 1992 it was later designated a local landmark. It was designed by landscape architect Marshall Johnson and commemorated 3 different important historical figures to the city of Highland Park. And then, as you know, in 2025, ownership was transferred to the city from the Park District. I just wanted to briefly, I'm not going to read this, but briefly just highlight for you the landmark criteria that was met in 1992. The city code sets out a number of different criteria that need to be met in order to be landmarked, locally landmarked, and these are the criteria. It's not an all or nothing. These are a selection of which criteria were determined at that point in time to have been met to allow for the local landmark of this garden. This is briefly the original 1942 plan for the park and the area in the Rose Garden. You can see the Rose Garden Center there. The building at the bottom of the screen is City Hall to orient you on the west, and then it moves in from the Rose Garden to the native garden, and then there's Players Hill, which is the kind of component that is the southernmost component of the garden. But just to give you an idea of the original vision and scope of the garden, which was not completely built to fruition in its entirety. So this is what it was envisioned to be. It wasn't built to its entire vision. And this is the existing conditions of the space. So just to give you that brief idea. And again, looking at the current status, where it originally started and where the current status is, the original planned elements were those three different elements: the rose garden, the wildflower garden, and then the Players Hill, and each area commemorated a different individual. Staff has done an analysis of what's remaining that is historic in the area, and staff identified the rose garden in its entirety as remaining historic element. And then of the wildflower garden, two elements of that, the sundial bench and the retaining wall, are the remaining historic elements. And there is actually, because the Players Hill component was never developed, that is not into what it was designed to be. That is not a historic element today. We want to talk about the considerations and how this will interact with the design process as we look at the place of remembrance. It is possible that the historic elements in there, as they exist today, could impact the design as far as if they are retained. So it has the ability to potentially limit the ability of the place of remembrance to achieve those three objectives that the mayor highlighted that were determined to be the objectives for the place of remembrance. So we just want you to be aware that in its current status, with its current landmark status, that could interact with that design process if SWA and is designed to keep those landmark status. So we're really looking for, again, policy feedback and a recommendation from City Council about how these will work together, because the local landmark designation and historic elements will inform this design process. And if the primary focus will be creating that shared space based on the needs of the feedback and the victims, the broader public, council and staff. So really, as we design that, as the design process goes forward, that focus on the place of remembrance and how that, we're looking for your feedback and how that interacts with the current historic status of the Rose Garden.
Can you put the picture back up of what it looks
Absolutely.
like now? And
What it
I'll
looks like now?
show you what it was supposed to be.
So that is the now, as you can see.
Like,
And there is the
What
vision,
else?
the original vision.
so, a couple of things that I saw in your report. A, most of the Egan roses are gone because the deer have snapped them into the ground. So there's not much left in terms of the Egan roses, and I'm not sure, I think double knockout roses survive the deer, but not a lot of roses are able to withstand the deer that live in the ravine. The pool never was built, the council ring, I'm talking about the top up right corner, those never happened. And the Players Hill, I think there's like a tree there with like some guy's name next to it or something.
That was never developed. I will note, I believe the pools actually may have originally existed, but were filled in long, long ago.
Right, okay. So, you know, on one hand, I love that this was landmarked and the intentionality behind recognizing the three, Jesse, Lowe Smith, Mr. Egan, and Jens Jensen. I think there's a way for us to sort of adapt to that rose garden design. I don't love the like non-fountain in the middle that's now filled with like friendship rocks and a big plastic fake rock. That just looks god awful. So I don't know, I'm just sharing my own opinion. That I think there's a way to incorporate some of the rose garden elements, but I don't know what the steps would be in terms of historic preservation. You know, like, and Steve, I think I turned to you and I said, so when you have a great plan that doesn't get realized, are you locked into that? Are you locked into the wish? Or are you locked into the, like, what happened but not, it's like barely there at this point. It's like a bunch of beds of half-dead roses and a non-fountain in the middle.
We are in an interesting predicament, an interesting state. We are at a point essentially of non-enforcement, and enforcement lies with the city. And it was our responsibility. We're the ones that failed to enforce. We're the owners of the property now. What to do, you know, that's kind of difficult also, because as you know, in Highland Park, and it has always been in Highland Park, any kind of change of status, whether it's from a property that is not designated to become designated, or a property that is designated to become undesignated, has a primary step with our Historic Preservation Commission. And their determination is to recommend if there is a change of status, but a final determination if there is to be no change of status. So if you're hinting, Mayor, in your comment that maybe we should de-designate it, it would be first entirely up to the Historic Preservation Commission. There's certainly a lot that could be brought before them, given the failure to have it at its state. But that, I just want to remind everybody about what our process is. We could change our process, but that is our process. And it's important to know that, because there's some other applications that are looking similarly. So I want you to be fully aware of the big comprehensive picture here in Highland Park.
Well, if I could weigh in, I deal a lot with dilemma leadership, and this is full of dilemmas right now. And you know, one of the dilemmas is obviously what you just described. There is a process, and it's our responsibility to do everything we can to follow the process, but we also have an exception process for a lot of things. And so this is a community experience that affected us all in ways that no one ever planned. Even when this park was designed, it was designed with a whole different concept. And then the plan wasn't really realized to the fullness, so it's an incomplete, historically preserved place. And I think this is, when it comes to dilemma management, I think all parties, the Historical Society, our commission, us, others, I think this is where we have to really be willing to kind of look at the big picture of what the objective is. And the objective is it's bigger than just preserving a historical place, even though that's the charter. But the bigger objective is we're trying to find a place of healing and remembrance. And I'll say a couple of comments, but I want to make my statement here. If this becomes a place of divisiveness as we process the dilemma, we will have failed as leaders across the board, the commission and the city council.
Right.
So I would urge us to rise above the full legality, and I will say this proudly as a non-lawyer. There's moments when the law can really constrict us to a place of impossibility and dilemma, and we have to obey the law, but part of us being leaders is to be able to say, what is the bigger objective that was not taken into account when these laws were put in place, or these protocols, so that we can rise above it and say, okay, what is the main objective? Is it holding on to the strict, narrow definition of this protocol and this policy, or is to address something that we never imagined would happen, and we have an opportunity? We've found the piece of land, we've had the listening, the community has said this place. The community has said this place, and Port Clinton, right? So we have to listen to that as representatives of the people and say, okay, the community has put a designation on this place, and now we say, oh, there's some dilemmas. Now we have to push hard and say, when push comes to shove, which will be the primary, we have to triage the conflicting demands and protocols upon us. So I'm just making a call for us to, whatever we feel, to not lose sight that the people of Highland Park has said this place. And if to fulfill this thing means putting some things aside or thinking creatively, so then let's do it. Now, thinking creatively, there's some names that are honored in this garden. Okay, could that be factored in even as we honored the others? I don't know, like a side thing, or there's some elements here that were either not well executed or executed fine that could somehow be preserved, right? So there's, back to the issue of symbol.
Or could they be moved?
Or they can be moved, right, by preserving
Can
it.
this be relocated?
Yeah, relocated or folded into the concept, because this is Highland Park too, right? So I don't know if there's lineage, I don't know if there's a design element here that would fit with the design elements that's shown here. But if we can make some continuity, so I'm not prescribing. I'm just saying this is a kind of brainstorming that leaders with different jurisdictions and different accountabilities can sort of lean into together and say, okay, how do we creatively figure out a way through?
And let me just say, I was responding to the mayor's question. You want to go in a direction, I will make sure there's a legal way to do it.
Yeah, but I don't want alienation to happen.
No,
One could
absolutely
determine
not.
a legal way to do it, and in the process, we alienate
Right,
and
That's the last
polarize.
thing
We
we
will
want.
fail if we polarize in this process.
right, right, right. Exactly. Exactly. Annette?
So I have quite a few questions and comments on that. First of all, Councilmember Tapia, thank you so much for leading in with that. I really appreciate it because the last thing we want to do is make something that should be really about the beauty of coming together and resilience into something cantankerous. So I completely agree with you on the way we approach it. But I also have a fundamental recognition and respect for preservation. And the problem with your basic tenet, not the tenet about us all working together, but about changing something because it's a town park, is, in my estimation, in so many ways, preservation is to ensure that something that we have protected for a specific reason for a long time is still honored and is not wiped away because something more important happened. And so if I'm not saying it as politically well or as sensitively as I am, I just want to go on the record saying I don't mean it that way. But from a legal perspective, and that's why I know that Corporation Council will protect us to do it, but in many ways, I don't know if it's possible because, for example, knowing the names of the 3 people who were to have, is it their elements or is their memories what has to be incorporated into the current park? Because if it's their elements, I would, say, why can't we take all these wonderful ideas and work them into the original plan as it was conceived? If it's their memories, we have a problem. On the other hand, do we want to wipe away that portion of it because we have something even worse that occurred? And so I'm very torn about this because, first of all, I obviously don't want to overstep our jurisdiction, and I really respect the expertise that the Historic Preservation Commission brings to this process, and I would urge us to work with them in order to incorporate the purpose that we all have now seen fit to move into this property. On the other hand, when we decided as a community to move it there, we didn't realize that it was landmark protected in the sense that it might stifle our creativity to move on with this remembrance. And I'm not sure we can just walk away from the original designation. So I would urge that if it's possible to incorporate the things that we really want to do with the original designation, I really want to retain that designation and broaden it and complete it, but with the view of all that has transpired since then and why we're doing this to begin with.
Thank you. Any other input?
Question?
Sure.
The original designation to honor the 3 individuals, was there, what's the rationale for choosing this site? Did something specific happen at this site? Or was it, this was a nice place to?
It was a nice place, is my recollection.
Not to mind, there's nothing in the documentation I've seen that relates to the physical location.
And one, oh, I'm sorry, finish your.
Thank you,
sorry,
thank you.
go ahead.
So with that said, I think hearing both well-described positions from both Councilmember Littler and Tavia, I think Councilmember Tavia said it perfectly. I also think that we should pay respect to the historical, intent and respect the importance of the commission. But this isn't just something bad that happened. This is so much bigger than that. And to Councilmember Tapia's point, this is a site that underwent significant amount of diligence as to the most logical place for people to be able to pay homage to that. And I believe there's common sense solutions to be able to still consider solutions that would allow us to pay homage to the three individuals in a different location or in a different way. And I would challenge us and caution us to try to jam that in with this site, because I think it will, it runs the risk of, I don't want to say watering down what we're trying to accomplish, but complicating what we're trying to accomplish with respect to the honoring the victims of the shooting and those who were there. So those are my thoughts.
So one thought that I've had looking at this is, you know, we use the Rose Garden currently as the temporary place of remembrance. And when people were asked, where would you like to see the permanent place of remembrance, it was literally called the Rose Garden. But I don't think very many people went past into the non-existent salute to John Jensen and Jesse Lowe Smith that has basically become an empty lot with a sundial and a bench in there. And so Ben and team, I ask you, you know, is there, and I'm not trying to design at all, but, you know, can we keep that oval? Because even the roses to the left are gone. There's nothing over there as far as I can remember. We've got a handful of efforts in this oval piece. The one that goes, the lobe that heads to the east doesn't exist anymore either. Yeah, I mean, that's it. And then use the rest of the land beyond that for what we're trying to achieve, in essence, having like an entrance room, an entrance in that pays homage to what has been this temporary place of remembrance. Because we kind of we tried to beef it up and make it more beautiful just as it served this temporary purpose. But then there is so much to the east of it that then allows you to do more. Again, this is just me trying to figure out how to thread the needle. You know, but I have no problem also saying, we've got an acre to the east of the library. Can we just pick this whole thing up and move it over there? Steve, I don't know if that's an option. I don't know that it was the location that mattered as much as the design that mattered. And I guess maybe that's a question for the Historic Preservation Commission. But to me, there are other places to pay homage to these three. And I don't know that this specific like place on the map matters as much as what they were trying to achieve. But again, so much of what was planned never even happened. So why are we trying to like accommodate all of this? This is me just sort of.
Or even the parklet there.
Right, right. I mean, literally over by St. John's and Central, you could turn that into the Rose Garden. So I don't know that it has to be here, but if it has to be here, then maybe we stick with that oval and then design to the east of it where we're really focusing in on the place of remembrance.
Mayor, may I note something there?
Sure.
In a conversation, we have had some preliminary conversations with SWA about this, and Ben, please step in if I'm not providing enough context. But it is possible, while that's certainly something that can be considered, it is possible that it would affect the experience of a memorial in terms of not being a holistic experience for individuals if they're coming through what was designed to be one thing and transitioning to another. We may not be able to provide that smooth experience and that holistic experience if it were to be retained in its current state.
Yeah.
Does that accurately reflect?
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would add to that is just this idea of opting in that has been really central, and a concern being that people, if the Rose Garden stays just as it is, people will see it as the Rose Garden from the street, say, go to visit the Rose Garden, and then they might be surprised to find this other, you know.
Yeah.
Or conversely, some people may not be able to find the place of remembrance without.
Because it's so
because
hidden,
we'll be
and that's
quite
not
talking
our
about.
intention.
So those would be the,
Yeah.
I think there's a really nice kind of woodland framed space at the rear.
Yeah.
That could be very lovely. It's more about how do you make that feel, you know,
Sacred enough.
yeah.
Okay, you need,
Oh, I would simply say that, we clearly want to proceed in as respectful a way as possible, and, to loop HPC, into this conversation as soon as possible. My understanding, based on brief update that I got from the city manager, was that we were telling SWA that they should proceed for the time being without the constraints of
Well, we want to get the feedback from the
landlord.
council
Yeah.
before.
And I agree with everything that has been said so far, yeah.
okay.
Mayor, just in your materials, one of the things that we provided you was the application for designation back in 1992. And one of the bases that was given for this piece of property, and I'm not making any judgment on this, I'm just reporting to you factually, was in the application that said the reason for this location was because it was donated to the city by the Men's Garden Club back in 1942 and was designed by the son-in-law of Jens Jensen.
Right, Commercial Johnson.
Right. So that, I just, as to why this location, I want you to be aware of that document.
A question and a follow-up comment. And I want to pick up on what you said, Mayor. What is protected by the designation, right? And so you're starting to answer here, but really, is it really the place or is it the
The
architecture?
plan, yeah.
And have a comment after you answer that.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think all we have is a very limited, the ordinance itself does not help us. It isn't drafted as it would be today with more detail about what our goal is to preserve. But in terms of the application, it was simply the fact that it was dedicated by a garden club, so they wanted to keep a garden element of it.
But if you elevate it to just the purpose of the Historical Preservation Commission, what are they preserving? What is their charter to preserve what? Not in this particular thing, but just in general.
It's an excellent question. I think it's interpretive. I think it's open for interpretation. I think we have the paragraph that is part of the application, and that provides our primary basis.
Okay. So if it's interpreted, let me
Which is why I
offer
was
another
talking about creativity.
other possible creative interpretation. Obviously, if I just go by the semantics, it's Historical Preservation Commission, so preserving something that already existed. But I'm putting my emphasis on historical. This place of remembrance is a historical architecture, because we are remembering something that happened in the history of Highland Park that shaped us. So I wonder, without understanding the full charter, and here it seems like it's kind of loose, for the Historical Preservation Commission to say, if we put the emphasis more on historical than preservation, can we balance those two things? Honor the need to remember something historical that happened, and at the same time preserve something that's already there. And to your point, Mayor, maybe the location is not as important as the preservation of the architecture, right? And make room for really a historical remembrance, which is really what's at stake here.
On the other hand, if you have the preservation and the natural elements that were what we originally should have put in there, couldn't you, in a sense, incorporate it, but then change the emphasis to the memorial portion of it? And therefore, you still have the key elements in terms of a garden club and perhaps even the design of a Jens Jensen and brilliance of all of that, but incorporate that into what we now have, which is a memorial that we want to keep alive, with nature being one of the main aspects of that memorial.
Do we know what the square footage is of the Rose Garden portion and how it compares to the acre that's by the library?
I don't have that off the top of my
Okay.
head.
It's not much.
I mean,
But
I just don't see us, tripping over our feet to maintain like half of this plan has never happened. So it's more, it feels to me like the Rose
Right.
Garden piece is the big piece, and the sundial, I've heard from 3 people who are apoplectic over the sundial. And it's like, okay, so can we move it and figure out a way to relocate it related to the sun and call it a day? It's, yeah,
The facts here and
it's a sundial.
and the very vague, the facts that we have about what has happened since the designation, the very vague application itself, the very vague ordinance, all lend itself to creative solutions such as those that were mentioned. I wouldn't rush to pounce on either of those or incorporate either of those immediately, but if that's the direction that the council wants to go, we can look for that kind of creativity. I think we have been dealt cards that allow for that.
So would it make sense to have the Historic Preservation Commission come to a committee of the whole and have a conversation that we could then notice that meeting, all of us could participate and sort of make our points and see where things roll? Does that make sense?
meeting
For sure. Yeah,
Okay with that?
For
Okay.
sure.
Okay.
because we may end up with just a modification as opposed to a de-designation.
A special
I
meeting.
can name the 3 other people who will show up.
But
Be
it's,
prepared.
you know, it's an important gesture to the HPC.
It
Yeah,
is,
yeah.
it is. And
Yeah,
yeah, okay.
I think it's lovely.
So we can, if we do a special meeting.
It can be a special meeting or make them have a special meeting at our committee of the whole meeting whenever we are having, you know? I mean, it's gotta be sooner rather than later, so you can all take that information and move forward.
Yeah, if we could, we'll do a polling, if we could look at a special meeting, because our next meeting is not until March 30th. And I know we've got some important
Special
budget conversations to have at that meeting,
Mm-hmm.
is the only thing, so.
What do you say?
Special meeting, it should be the only agenda item.
Yep.
Yeah,
I
Agreed.
agree,
Agreed.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay. Excellent,
Okay.
I'll keep you posted. Great, thank you. Thanks, do we have time to talk about short-term rentals?
with 15 minutes, it's up to you.
Let's
You wanna
give it a
start?
shot.
Okay.
Sure,
Our next meeting's not till March 30th. March 30th?
yeah. Enjoy spring
gotta
break,
update
my
me.
friend.
Nope. 9? Not 9?
Uh-uh.
Cancel.
Thank you, thank you.
Cancel.
See ya.
Cancel culture.
Well, we may be meeting on the 9th now.
Well, if they're-
It's supposed to be the 16th, but that's my,
Yeah.
All right.
It's your birthday.
Are you ready, ma'am?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so this is a brief discussion related to short-term rental regulation in the city. Staff requests feedback. Don't know what happened to this screen, so there you go. Regarding the city's short-term rental policies and regulations. Want to get your feedback on just continued support for the allowance that we have for short-term rentals, definition of primary residence, use of industry data for enforcement, and geographic limitations, licensing, and possible prohibition if that's the council's desire. City's code is intended to allow reasonable use of residential properties as short-term rentals, provided that it is the property owner's primary residence. So this law was created in November of 2020, and what it essentially did was recognize short-term rentals of residential homes as accessory uses. And accessory means accessory to the primary, which is a single-family detached home with a primary resident. And that's a real important point. The idea was to provide a little bit of a relief valve for snowbirds and others who take extended vacations or travel elsewhere and desire to have a reasonable use of their home as a short-term rental. It was not intended for commercial use of homes as short-term rentals, so that's important to know. So the definition of a short-term rental is the accessory use of a dwelling unit, overnight accommodations that is available for rent by transient guests for a period shorter than 30 consecutive days. It doesn't include boarding houses, hotels, timeshare uses, lodging houses, etc. the rental of the dwelling unit pursuant to the rental agreement executed in conjunction with a contract to sell the dwelling unit. So there's two instances, and you can't have it for boarding houses, hotels. It can't be one of those, but you can do so as part of a sale. And that was the other element that I meant to lead off with was, you have folks that are snowbirds, and then you have folks selling a home, and they're in between homes, and sometimes they're holding a home for a little bit. They got to float it, right? And they're in another home, and they have two homes. And so there's those issues as well. And so, so the zoning code, section 150-430, regulates short-term rentals and requires a registration per chapter 154. Chapter 154 rental registration has been around for over 10 years. And that existed prior to our recognition of short-term rentals. And so what the short-term rental regulation does is it requires a registration so that we know about it. And then we can make sure that people read and understand the law that pertains to short-term rentals and operate things appropriately. We know who they are in case there's issues. And then, police and others and my office can get involved in remedying those through enforcement actions as necessary. We haven't had many complaints, but those received come from all over the community. And I will tell you, people feel very strongly about short-term rentals, thinking that they shouldn't be allowed, those who have complained. We have had enforcement efforts, and most recently, we just, with our help of Corporation Counsel Martinez and Jim Ferber, Senior Inspector, secured over $9,000 in fine for a particular location. That is the highest fine levied on a short-term rental for repeated violations of garbage controls. So,
I'm sorry, how much was that?
Over $9,000.
It's hard to understand you. How much was that fine?
Over $9,000 over I think there was 11 to 13 individual citations.
Thank you.
That was the highest of its kind by far. Most of the others over the years have been at the minimum and were resolved thereafter. But as I will point out just right now, the next slide, we do need some additional tools to aid our enforcement efforts. And so since November 2020, the adoption of the short-term rental regulations, staff's identified a need for additional information that would greatly help our enforcement efforts. So we're looking for a couple of things. One, amending Chapter 154 rental registration to require additional information to demonstrate primary residence as required by the zoning code section 154.30. And then amending Chapter 150 definitions to specify what specifically primary residence means. Now, our current code does not have a definition for primary residence. That means that the normal dictionary definition can be applied, but we want to have a specific definition that we've developed, and it's based on the IRS definition of what a primary residence is. So it's not something that we're just making up out of nothing. It's something that's used for real serious things in governmental understanding of where your residence is. So that's number one. Number two is purchasing short-term rental data from data brokers. This would greatly aid our efforts in terms of number of days rented. We've had, over the years, complaints about, hey, they're doing this for more than 45 days a year. I see a car with different plates, every day over there and this kind of thing. And so that's very hard to enforce on without independently being able to acquire data. Now, the businesses that provide these services, such as Airbnb, Vrbo, all those services, they don't share their data. Well, what they do is they sell it, so we can buy it. So, thanks for the help, but not really. So it's several $1,000s. I think when I looked at it a few years ago, it was about $3,000 a year.
Okay.
So, and what that will do is they're data aggregators that will do by address how many times it's been rented on one of these places. So that's pretty good information. What we have done thus far is we've literally asked the people running the Airbnb how many times they've rented and to provide us a report from their service provider. And, to people's credit, they have. And in certain cases, we've been able to enforce based on that and found them to be in violation. But if we want to be more proactive and really nip this in the bud before it becomes an issue, we'd just get a report once a month and we'd know, and we'd be able to contact folks and say, hey, do you realize that this is a law here? You signed this document saying you recognize this, you read and understood the law, so we really would like you to abide by it. So, and then if that doesn't work, well, then we go right to citation thereafter. So I do think that would make for a lot less staff time and a lot less haggling over what is going on.
And Joel, if I can just add,
Sure.
having had a lot of experience in this space in a lot of other towns, enforcement by a government has been difficult. If a government is looking to try to determine and smoke out whether a particular property is an Airbnb, and doing it by going on with our government email address and making an inquiry, I'd like to rent. Most of the Airbnbs, the big companies, have now blocked out government email addresses, knowing that there are enforcement efforts. And many governments have turned to their employees using their personal email addresses, but that's not something that is a very good thing to do.
How many do we have? Do we know?
So, and just.
How many are registered and
How many are registered? That's a better question. Yeah, thank you. I can answer that one. How many that we have, that's unclear. But we have 12 registered at this time. And so we're in registration mode again. By April 1st, folks need to register again. So we may have more this year, we'll see. But we have about, steady state, about 12. I think one year was 15. But there are more than that, as you
I'm sure you, if you go online right now,
Yeah.
you'll find more than 12.
And so,
Well, the other piece is when we had the neighborhood meeting last year, there were several families on one particular street who were agitated that I think the majority of houses on their street were short-term rental, creating a completely different environment than the one that they moved.
there were two.
And that's precisely, yeah.
McDaniels and Court are both pretty close together, and they're both registered. We have 2 registered right now, and there was concerns about, well, what happens if more and more happen, and then this whole block becomes this way. And so, yes, that's one of the things that we were going to talk about today about, do we want geographic buffering around these types of uses?
Well,
or not?
before you get to that, just the primary residence concept, the reason why this is an issue, and we talked about it, or those that were here when we first adopted this regulation, is because many, there are investors out there, including some of the large global companies, that are simply buying houses for the sole purpose of having them serve as short-term rentals. And so our imposition of the primary residence concept curtails that. It cuts that off.
As was intended by council, a reasonable use of your home, not a business or commercial use of your home. And so that's why we want to make that a definition in our code as opposed to relying on a definition that would be in the dictionary. And so we want to make that very clear. And so this would be one of the changes we'd be looking to make with the primary residence. And please know, this is currently the law. This defines it and it puts a finer point on it, and also enables us to request information to demonstrate that.
Do you mean?
I mean, I'm guessing that.
Hang on, Annette. Go ahead.
Director Fontaine is going further, but in the packet was beyond the defining primary residence was the possibility of licensing for being required.
Yeah, that's-
Yep, we'll
That's
get to that
fine.
just in. So here we have.
Also, hang on, Annette, I think had something she wanted to say.
So, in a way, actually, I'd like to hear what Director Fontaine has to say to
Okay.
Councilmember Ross's question, and then I do have a statement to make, but thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Joel, do you want to maybe just
Councilmember
finish,
Ross,
because we've
sure.
got all the recommendations
Sure.
on here, and then
Right.
So you're,
certainly
okay.
welcome your questions in the future.
So this would be what would be required to demonstrate your primary residence. And so we would ask for that at time of application before we would say you could be a short-term rental. We could also ask for that information if there's an enforcement action that's needed. And so, again, there's 2 sections of code this will be pertain to, and that has to do with our rental registration. And so what you'd have here is that you'd have these documents required to demonstrate that it is in fact your primary residence. I do feel that that will help tremendously in the problems associated with short-term rentals. It really will. And it'll make sure that folks are utilizing this as appropriate. Having said that, the mayor brought up a very good point about geographic limitations to prevent concentration of short-term rentals. Now, as it is right now, you know, it's an accessory use for folks owning single-family homes, et cetera, so forth, and they can do it. If there's a neighbor next door to them that has it before them, it doesn't matter, you can still use your home that way. So there's something to think about in terms of a policy about whether or not the right to do something should be contingent on what your next door neighbor just did versus whether or not you have a right to use your home in that way. That's one aspect of things. You know, we could also just prohibit them in certain zoning districts or throughout the city. I mean, you know, that could be, there's other communities that do that, and one of the follow-ups that we're gonna do as staff is take a survey of other communities to just find out what they're doing as well. And you had asked about that back in 2020 also. You can license rather than register. And so, you know, a license is a permission to do something rather than merely a requirement to tell us you're doing it. So right now we have a registration. That's very different than a license. Licenses can be revoked, things like that. So something to think about in terms of regulating. As I mentioned, we have some next steps that we suggest, but wanted to hear the feedback from council as to the formal consideration with your direction of code amendments to make primary residence as defined, et cetera, so forth as we went through that. And then also your feedback on researching further to see if it's still available. It's been a few years, but this data broker services that we identified a couple of years back. And then we'll conduct a survey of communities about short-term rentals as well. And this would then come back to you, you know, because it would require ordinance changes.
Okay.
And one other, to add to the list of recommendations, things for you to consider. This takes it a little outside of the box, but may as well put it on the table. And that's the power to tax. Make these subject to your existing 5% hotel tax.
You could do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so Mayor,
Yes,
can
ma'am.
I chime in? Thank you.
Sure.
So first of all, I really want to commend staff because many times we're given various options, yes, no, and it is really yes, no with a couple of caveats. And what I like about all of this is the openness with which we're still open to the idea. And I say that as a former member of the PDC when we did all the research on should we permit short-term rentals, and then it was brought to the city council. And the PDC at the time felt very strongly that we as a community should remain competitive with other communities so that when someone purchased a home in Highland Park but did want to use it for a short-term rental every now and again, they should at least have that optionality if it was permitted in a neighboring community so that Highland Park wouldn't be held back in a sense if they didn't have that same freedom. So in keeping with that, I really would like to make it as easy as possible for staff and give them the tools that they're requesting and reevaluate this to see in fact whether we can and whether that, I like the idea of the licensure better than the permit. And that's because, Mayor, to your point, if one neighborhood becomes too heavily licensed in this particular fashion, we don't give out any more licenses and we limit it that way. But I think that they've come up with some really creative ways in which to regulate this a little bit better and yet keep it as an option for residents in our community. And Corporation Council, I love the idea because you know me with the taxation. If we can bring in some revenue to the city because people are using this, I think that's a great idea too. So I just wanted to say that, you know, especially in light of this perhaps up and coming legislation about ADUs and primary residence and people who, you know, want to be able to build another property and you know, that even though we're home rule, that maybe the way in which Illinois is going it is certainly the way in which California has gone. I mean, it's almost second nature when there's a primary residence to have, if there's enough property, an ADU. And people have used it as a source of income. So, and I don't want to get into the whole dilemma of alternate dwelling units right now, but I do think that to cut this off right now would not be going with the trend of what we see, and so I like these alternatives. to keep
My
it
understanding of the bill in Illinois proposal is that there's state preemption, right?
That's
That is
correct.
the
I hope
big
you're all
issue.
getting our alerts on this. We provide a very comprehensive study generally, and then today we send out
We do it
one
for
specifically on ADUs.
Right.
Right, and so to be clear,
It was great.
this is just about renting
Primary.
less than 30 days. So
Right.
ADUs would be theoretically
A whole different-
rented
All the
a
time.
month at a
Right.
time or more, like
Right.
a year at a time, you know, so it would pertain to ADUs or non-ADUs, you know.
So in
there's
the
a-
interest of
right.
time, I think it's important that we kind of do a quick straw poll around the table.
Thank you.
Do you favor prohibiting, because that, like, then you're not having any conversation about the rest of it? Or do you want to go ahead with what staff is recommending in terms of having a defined term for primary residence, gathering the industry data, getting a better understanding of what our surrounding communities are doing, and having the potential for geographic limitations and licensing? And then we'll also add in taxation if that's something else that people are interested in. So, yeah, we'll just go around the table.
Yeah, and all this is to direct staff to give us the data, right?
Right, it's not any, there's no
No.
final
Come back
decision
to
committee.
because we're
I'm
just
good with
gathering.
all of it,
You're good with all of it. Well, you don't want to prohibit though.
other than prohibition.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't see prohibiting it, but I have slightly, I do support everything staff is recommending. The geographic limitations, licensing, defining the residence, primary residence, thank you. And I think it's interesting, you know, hearing about other communities. My sense reading, you know, the packet was that I understand that staff should research what other communities are doing, but I feel like we are our own city.
Right, right.
And we can decide, you know, for ourselves, do residents, you know, really want this or not? I mean, when I say want more, in any event, I don't support prohibiting it. I guess I'm just trying to say, go easy on the what is everybody else doing? We are Highland Park and,
Right.
you know, we
We
decide.
can make our own minds. Okay. Marissa?
Yes, I'm in favor of everything on there, as well as the tax question too.
Okay, John?
Great presentation, agreed with the suggestions. I'm not sure how I feel about geographic limitations, so we'll be curious to hear more.
Okay.
But certainly supportive of the continued work here, as suggested.
Okay. And Annette, do you feel you were able to give your feedback on the recommendations?
I think it's all great, except I do not support the geographic limitations. I'd rather look at it through licensure, but other than that, I think it's all great. Thank you.
Great, okay. And then I support it. I am interested in the geographic limitations. I think you can't overburden a particular block just by virtue of where they live. I think that's just not fair to people who have made an investment in buying their home and now all of a sudden half the street is, you know, short-term rentals. I just don't think that's fair to people. All right, great job, Joel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor, thank you, Council.
We will adjourn and we'll do closed session after the city council meeting.
Yeah, so adjourn this meeting.
So seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Bye.
All right.